Where did my art come from? Unfinished reflections on the beginning. Where did your art come from since you started painting only in your late 60s? Your art is abstract, an amalgam of pastels, watercolors, acrylic, oil, and house paint, sometimes with titles and often without. Please tell us what your paintings mean. When these questions are asked, I usually play dumb. I respond with a shrug of the shoulders and a blank facial expression, as if I should know. But having been asked about my art, I became curious myself. Where does my art come from? What does it mean? I am by training a contemporary historian. As a Jew, memory is alive in the present. So I begin there with my past. Aside from childhood drawings, like most children, I think the beginning of my art is to be found in my lecturing around the country and the world during the late 1980s and early 1990s. During that time, I was finding my voice as a Jew on the most controversial and meaningful topic of the day, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As a Jew of conscience, at least striving to be one, I was writing and lecturing on a Jewish theology of liberation. This theology has many sides, but in a nutshell, it's about how Jews once oppressed in the Holocaust have become oppressors of the Palestinians. With this confessional addendum: Jewish empowerment in Israel has not liberated us. In oppressing the Palestinian people, we have become enslaved to our own power. We Jews can only become free when Palestinians are free in their own homeland. During these early days, I was one of a handful of Jews laying the squandering of Jewish history on the line, without nuance or equivocation. My rhetoric, the cadence of my speech, and coming from the Jewish tradition of struggle and suffering, caused quite a stir. It was all in public. I encountered attempts to shout me down, derisive laughter and jeering, threats of physical violence and death threats. This happened before I came to town and after, during my lectures too. How to deal with these emotional and physical assaults on my being? I needed a plan. I started outlining my prepared presentations with different colored felt pens. Colors livened up my long yellow sheets of paper. They marked my way, and when the interruptions came, diverted my attention. To the podium, I brought postcards of art from museums and photographs I took of beautiful beach scenery. No one in the audience knew I had these props. When the commotion began, I looked at them until the uproar died down. Though I am not a professional poet, I have written poetry throughout my life. I think and write poetically. At times, certain vivid images come to me. They crystallize my thoughts. Often my narrative writing come by way of poetry and images. Often these poetic and imagery sensibilities are controversial, like the image of Star of David helicopter gunships being present and in and guarding the Ark of the Covenant in synagogues around the world. Another image, Jews of conscience walking into their final exile, carrying the covenant with them. I often thought and told others it was pure luck that I didn't draw or paint these evocative images. Where would these images go if they were visualized in art? Then one day, a friend with an artistic bent decided to spend her free time painting. We shopped for watercolors and paper to satisfy her urge. Later, as I watched her paint, I suddenly had the urge to take up my own brush. At the outset, it was only that, an urge. I had no training in art and hardly knew the painter's implements or the mixing of colors. My urge overwhelmed what I lacked. I took a blank sheet of typing paper and began. Looking back now, 2 years or so after beginning, with more than 1,600 paintings tucked in drawers and propped up on shelves in my home, posting them regularly in configurations that no true artist would embrace, I have come to think of my art as abstract with meaning. They are markings on my journey. Beyond the quality of my art or lack thereof, they are a continuation of my first felt pen markings I made on my lecture notes to ward off the violence I experienced. My art is a way of dealing with the trauma of those years, of carrying a prophetic message that traveled with me and continues to exist within me. A message, as with all prophetic images, that offers hope for the change that rarely, if ever, arrives. I have begun to refer to these last years as my painting years, where prophetic imaging comes to light in its broken hope. The breaks in the prophetic are all too obvious to see. My paintings are my sharing of the prophetic as it struggles and falls apart. What can we say about the prophetic as it falls apart, when trauma bounced by hope triumphs? We shall not overcome, really. There will always be something else gone wrong. Often I leave my painting from the day before on my dining room table. As I awake and during breakfast, I looked over the painting as if it has a power to heal. What draws me most are the patterns and the colors. As a healing, we all need to move about and struggle for another day. Yes, some have criticized my art as a retreat. A once bold voice has retired from the justice battlefield. To each his own, I think, when I hear these criticisms. Let every voice be heard. Let every voice go silent. Let every voice turn its own way. I still speak on occasion, like a pinch hitter in baseball who emerges from the dugout late in the game. I can still deliver a hit on occasion. Looking through my journals from decades ago, I was still in college. I ran across a statement I copied down, but unfortunately, without the author's name. Its significance for me increases over time. It reads, "The Jewish prophet, deeply aware of Jewish history, looks to his right and to his left, and continues on his way." So it is throughout history. Let every voice be heard. Let every voice go silent. Let every voice turn its own way.